All right, so we're back again with another project. Um, as I said just before that, I'm really making a lot of these, and that's because I really enjoy them. I like the simplicity, and at the same time, I can do some really complex things with them, as this episode or this project might make clear, because I'm actually delving a little deeper into the silhouettes themselves and how I can make them more detailed without compromising the style that I'm developing for this. As you can see, this time I'm doing Rise of the Tomb Raider because it had such an interesting pose and a very characteristic, very iconic pose there on the front cover. So I did what I usually do is try to make a trace using the trace tool, and when that inevitably don't work out, I sit down and do it manually. What I'm trying to do different this time is I'm actually trying to make it a little bit more modular. So I'm actually not, you can see I'm removing some of the hair that I made there. I'm actually not going to trace the hair traditionally. Instead, I'm tracing the core figure of her clothes and her pose. And then I'm actually making the add-ons, if you will, separately. So the first project I did, I made the lightsabers separately, and I'm taking that to the next step now by making, you can tell there, I'm just removing the piece again. Everything that isn't part of the core character, I'm tracing separately. That gives me greater granular control over the figure that I'm making, and I have greater control over how I want that to pan out and how I want to shape the ultimate profile in the end. So this is what I'm trying out, and my first mistake here was I didn't connect the outline properly. So it ends up being two different contours with her right arm being a separate contour. So I had to spend a little bit of time hacking my way back into making one complete silhouette. So that took some time. It was just a basic mistake of whenever you make a series of Bezier pen marks, trails, paths, whatever you want to call them, you can continue an existing path by linking up with the end node. But I missed that apparently this time, and so I had to stitch them back together essentially by making use of some clever subtractions and additions until I had a complete silhouette. So that was just a big little misstep there. But now I got the core character, and I can sit down and do the additions separately, which gives me greater control and greater ability to control the different contours, and it allows me to pay attention to the details that matter on that object itself instead of having to roll everything into one big bunch of nodes. So I really prefer this in hindsight. This gives me more freedom in doing what I want to do. So I'm tracing the ice picks. Then I decided to do the flare, and that's just a simple square there with some rectangles. And then I'm going to do something new, which is I'm going to trace the hair not by actual tracing, but just by drawing on top of it and using some power strokes to make a flowing lock of hair wherever I want to do it. Which works out pretty well here because each strand of hair is its own character almost. It would look really weird if the hair was traced using straight lines or a bunch of nodes. Really, it would just look flat, and it would look basically low resolution is the best I can come up with. It would be all sharp edges and blunt corners, and it wouldn't look good. So what I'm doing here is that I'm actually just making some Bezier paths and just expanding those into some power strokes. So that worked out really well, and it gives it a lot more flowing quality, less rigid, and more natural looking. So I really like that. Some quick slashes for the bow, some lines for the string, and then I got her right boot with some bootstraps. And I'm marking those as red for now because I'm not actually sure I like them. So I made them, but I'm not sure I'm keeping them. Same with the arrows here. I'm not really making a big production out of them because I'm not sure I want them. They might be more noise than not. So I'm a bit skeptical right now, but I'm making them. Then I'll see how it goes. For the flare here, I only just now figured out that I wanted to do something with that flare. I wasn't sure if I wanted, but now I just decided to go all in on the flare and really make that shine. No pun intended. Um, so just like the lightsabers, where the silhouette and the lightsaber itself provided some contrast and some eye-catching object, this time I decided the flare was going to be that object. I briefly toyed with tracing some of the inside of her clothes to give a sort of contrast, because it did look a little bit black and black. But I quickly decided that I'm not good enough at tracing that to make it look good, so I just gave up on that for now, at least. So yeah, and then I tried outlining her facial features just a bit to see if that would break up some of the blackness, but no, it didn't look good, and I would have to be way more invested in it than I am right now if I wanted to make that work, and I didn't want to give that. So instead, I did something a little bit cheesy. I took a cherry tracing, just removed the background, and then kept some of the grit and some of the, I guess, speckles that would give pretty much the same effect. I was very sure to keep out the face because I did not want anything on the face, and I removed some from the bow and her arms and legs as well. So I just kept some of the core, her torso, some of the speckles there to give it some depth. But I was really trying not to do too much. A two-tone silhouette is what I'm going for here. So as usual, I'm having to fix up some hands because hands are very hard to trace and keep good. So I'm tightening up those a little bit. And now comes the fun part, actually making the flare. I had a lot of fun with this, just different layers of different watercolor effects, some watercolors, and done in the right order, it can be really powerful. Just like when I did the lightsabers, and whenever I do some other effects that I don't think I've made public actually. Anyway, so just different layers of light to dark colors will make that really pop. And I'm trying to set up a simple background here to more clearly figure out what I want in terms of contrast. So this is the basic configuration, or the basic setup of what I want. And the red flare just really made it easy to choose a color here. Red for the background would look amazing, and so of course it had to be red. I'm making this up completely as I go, by the way. This project, more than anything, was just let's trace Lara Croft and see what happens. I had no idea that I wanted to do the flare thing before I actually came to the flare, and now the color scheme just creates itself basically. Same goes for the text, which we're going to do now because I want her complete name, Lara Croft, and I'm doing the same process that I'm doing for this, what I essentially called skeleton Sherman now, because it's minimalistic Shermans but with some almost sci-fi qualities to it, which makes the reader just look an extra time before they actually decipher what they're looking at, while still being, completely readable, at least in my mind. So it's a bit of a longer piece of text than the last few times. Same principles apply though. I'm starting off writing the proto letters, as I call it, the uncut letters, just trying to figure out what can line up, what do I want to put where, and how can I make certain concentric letters happen while also keeping everything readable, and toying a little bit about how I want the symmetry to appear, because this time I also want some horizontal symmetry. I want to line things up horizontally if I can, while also keeping in mind that I have two lines of text this time, so I have some verticality as well that I can play into later. But happy with the first stage. I'm going further along to the destructive editing, where I start to play around with some thicknesses. You can tell there that I'm doing some horizontal adjustments, lining everything up the way I want it. And at the same time, I'm starting to make the dots and the lines that I need for the modifiers. Um, so we got a C there. Line that up nicely. I decided to keep the little offshot there on the left because it doesn't affect the letter itself, and it looks pretty cool. Completes the circle, so to speak. Made some decoration lines at the top there just to fill out the big empty space of the A. And now I'm cutting the H. No, the F, sorry. And I did some pretty cheeky stuff here with the T, which I decided to make symmetrical. So I decided to cut it, put it back in, redo that part, but with actual symmetry with respect to the horizontal line. So we end up with this really wacky, but technically still readable HT at the end there. Um, so playing around with some breakup of some lines, moving those things really close together to sort of make it coherent. Instead of two lines of text, it's just one block of text essentially, and just making some adjustments to the lines, making some effects, very minimal use of the power stroke there, just to taper off some edges. Um, and I think this looks pretty interesting. Just tightening up some lines there, and I want those corners to be sharp, so I just did what I do when I need those to be sharp. I just eyeball it and make it manually, because I can't be bothered to properly do the tapering and the actual meter effects there. I just add them on as a piece of text. Now at this point I realized I actually ended the line on the T, making it not a T. So I had to do some quick surgical thingies where I need to remove the old part, remove the actual connection, but still keeping the overall shape of the T outline. So that happened, and everyone can mix and match that the way they want it until it works. Putting the text on, adding some similar effects at the bottom as I did on the background at the top, adding some extra light to the flare because it lacked that extra spark of light, I think. So I just made some more. I mean, the more layers you put on, the crazier it looks. But when it works, it works. And I decided to forego the red coloring and go with the silver. It's worked very well before, and it did as well here. So that's basically the project here. I'm done.